welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're digging into something pretty fundamental in healthcare. Maybe something you don't think about too often, Foley catheters. We've got this detailed analysis, the Global Foley Catheters Market Report 2025. And, well, our goal is basically to pull out the key stuff for you.
Exactly. Give you the important insights without you needing to wade through, tons of data.
Yeah, consider it a shortcut to understanding what's happening in this, frankly, pretty robust market.
It really is. Surprisingly dynamic.
Okay, so let's jump right in with a big number. For 2025, the global market size for Foley catheters, estimated at USD $260 million.
$2.16 billion. Yeah, that's a lot of catheters.
It is. And what's really interesting is where it's headed.
Right, the growth trajectory. The report suggests quite significant expansion.
Yeah, exactly. By 2033, they're forecasting sales to hit USD $3,468.78 million.
Wow.
It's well over $1 billion more. And the annual growth rate, the CAGR, compound annual growth rate, that's projected at 6.10% from 2025 onwards.
So a solid 6.1% year. That's definitely strong momentum for a medical device market like this.
For sure. And just quickly, for anyone maybe less familiar, a Foley catheter, it's basically that thin, flexible tube, goes into the bladder to drain urine.
Yeah, a very common medical tool used in lots of situations, but seeing how the market for it is changing and growing, that's what's fascinating here.
Okay, so let's unpack that growth a bit more. We've got the global picture, the big numbers.
Yeah.
How does it break down by region?
Right. Geographically, well, in 2025, North America is the biggest piece of the pie, over 37% of the global revenue.
Okay.
Which translates to about $799.2 million US dollars.
And their growth?
Still solid, but maybe not the fastest. Projected CAGR is 4.6% through to 2033.
Right, makes sense. Established healthcare systems there. What about Europe? Second biggest.
Yep, Europe's number 2. Over 29% of the revenue. That's about $626.4 million in 2025.
Okay.
And their growth is projected a bit higher than North America's, actually. 5.2% CAGR.
So North America, Europe. They're the current market leaders by size. But you mentioned faster growth elsewhere.
Yes, that would be the Asia-Pacific region, APAC.
Okay.
Right now, they're sitting at around 24% of the market share, about $518.4 million in 2025. But here's the kicker. Their projected CAGR is a whopping 8.8%.
Wow, 8.8. That's huge.
It really is. That makes APAC the fastest growing region by a significant margin. And it's not just, more procedures. It points to big investments in healthcare infrastructure there, rising incomes, improving access.
Right, a whole combination of factors.
Exactly. A major area of opportunity if you're in this space.
Definitely something to watch. Okay, what about the other regions? South America, Middle East?
Africa, sure. South America holds just over 4% share. That's about $82 million in 2025, with pretty strong CAGR forecast at 6.8%.
Okay.
The Middle East is similar in size, around 4% too, about $86 million, but their growth is projected even higher, 7.4% CAGR. And then Africa, smaller share, around 2.2%, which is about $47.5 million, but still growing steadily at 6.4% CAGR.
So, yeah, the big takeaway is North America and Europe lead now, but the real dynamic growth is APAC, followed by the Middle East and South America.
Precisely.
All right, let's shift gears to the product itself, the different types of Foley catheters. The report mentioned a few.
It mainly breaks them down into 2-way, 3-way, and 4-way catheters.
Okay.
And right now the thinking is that 3-way catheters probably hold the largest market share.
3-way. Got it. What's the reason for their dominance?
It's really about their design. They allow for post-operative bladder irrigation.
Irrigation.
Yeah, crucial after certain surgeries, especially urology, like prostate procedures. It helps flush things out, reduces the risk of blood clots or blockages forming.
Okay, that makes sense.
And with urological conditions becoming more common, the need for that specific function keeps demand high. Hospitals, long-term care, they rely on these.
So, 3-way leads for specific important functions. But wasn't there another type showing the fastest growth?
Yes, exactly. That's the 2-way catheter segment.
Okay.
While the 3-way has its niche, the 2-way is, well, it's just incredibly versatile. Simple, effective for both short-term and long-term drainage.
So, more general use.
Pretty much. You see them everywhere, hospitals, long-term care, even home healthcare settings. For patients with chronic conditions, post-surgery recovery, urinary retention, Lots of applications.
Right.
And there's this trend towards less invasive options, better patient comfort. The simpler two-way design fits well there. So while three-way is key for irrigation, the sheer adaptability of the two-way is driving that faster growth rate.
Interesting contrast. The specialized leader versus the adaptable fast grower. Okay, what about the materials? What are these things made of? Latex and silicone seem common.
Those are the main ones, yeah, latex and silicone. And currently, latex catheters actually hold the largest slice of the market.
Really? Even with, latex allergies being a concern.
That's a good point. But latex has some advantages. It's flexible, it's generally cheaper, and clinicians and patients are just very familiar with it.
Okay.
Plus, manufacturers are addressing the allergy issue. You see a lot of latex catheters now with hydrogel or silicone coatings.
Oh, like a barrier layer.
Exactly. It reduces direct contact, minimizes allergy risk for many, but keeps the cost down. That's quite common in places like Asia Pacific and Latin America, apparently.
So a workaround to keep using latex. But silicone is growing fast too, right?
Oh, definitely. The silicone segment is expanding rapidly.
Why is that?
Better biocompatibility is a big one, less irritation for the patient,
Okay.
lower risk of infection, which is huge, especially with concerns about hospital-acquired infections. And they're much better suited for long-term use. They don't tend to cause as much incrustation or blockage over time.
Right, so patient safety, infection control, suitability for longer use.
Precisely. As healthcare focuses more on those aspects, the demand for silicone just keeps rising, even if it might cost a bit more upfront.
Makes sense. The benefits stack up, especially for extended use. Okay, let's talk end users. Who's actually using all these catheters?
Right. The report breaks it down into hospitals, long-term care facilities, and then a sort of catch-all others category.
And who's the biggest user group right now?
That would be long-term care facilities.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
Aging population and all that.
Exactly. You've got more elderly people globally, plus a rise in chronic conditions that require long-term bladder management. Nursing homes, assisted living, they have a constant need. And you add in trends like more palliative care, more home health care. It all points to sustained demand in that long-term care setting. Plus, those improved materials we talked about, like antimicrobial coatings, make them safer for long durations.
So big, steady market driven by demographics. What about hospitals? They must use a ton, too.
Absolutely. And while long-term care has the biggest share now, hospitals are actually the fastest growing sector.
Ah, okay. Why the rapid growth there?
It's the sheer volume of use. Post-surgery, critical care units, patients admitted with urinary retention. Hospitals use them constantly.
Right.
So as hospital admissions rise, as the number of surgeries increases, and as urological issues become more prevalent, the demand in hospitals just keeps climbing.
And they'd likely want the better quality ones too, right? The silicone, the anti-infection types.
For sure. Hospitals are very focused on preventing infections and complications, so they're often driving the demand for those higher spec, often silicone-based catheters.
Got it. So long-term care is the volume leader due to demographics, but hospitals are growing faster due to the intensity of medical interventions. Okay, let's dive into some of those regional specifics. You mentioned North America earlier. Can we break that down a bit?
Sure. So North America, total market around $799 million in 2025, growing at 4.6% CAGR. The U.S. is the giant there, obviously. About $630 million, growing at 4.4%. Driven by, the aging population, lots of R&D, strong infrastructure.
Makes sense. Canada, Mexico.
Canada's about 96 million, but growing a bit faster, actually, 5.4% CAGR.
Yeah.
Universal healthcare, rising incontinence rates mentioned as factors. Mexico's around 73 million, growing at 5.1%.
Okay, interesting that Canada's growth is slightly outpacing the U.S. there. Now, Europe, you said 626 million total, 5.2% CAGR. How does that break down?
Right. Let's see. Germany is the largest single market in Europe, about 124 million, growing at 5.4%. Strong medical device sector there, strict safety rules.
Okay.
The UK is next, about 105 million, but with a higher growth rate, 6.0%. NHS initiatives, home healthcare focus are driving that.
Right.
Then you've got Russia, surprisingly large, around 97 million, though slower growth at 4.2%. France is about 58 million, 4.4% growth. Italy, about 54 million, 4.6%. Spain, around 51 million, 4.3%.
So a bit varied across the major economies.
Yeah, and even smaller countries show decent growth. Sweden, nearly 20 million, growing over 5%. Denmark, 13 million, 5%. Switzerland, over 9 million, 4.8%. Even Luxembourg, 7.5 million, but growing at 5.5%.
Wow, so pretty consistent demand across the board in Europe.
Seems like it. The rest of Europe combined is another 88 million or so, growing a bit slower at 3.9%.
Fascinating detail.
Okay.
Now for the big growth story. Asia Pacific. 518 million total, 8.8% CAGR. Break that down for us.
Okay, APAC. China is the heavyweight, no surprise.
Right.
Around $218 million in 2025, growing at a strong 8.3%. Urbanization, more hospitals, healthcare reforms are contributing.
Right.
Japan is next, about 71.5 million, growing at 7.3%. South Korea around 62 million, growing even faster at 7.9%.
Okay.
And then India really stands out. Market size about 52 million in 2025, but the CAGR is projected at 10.7%.
10.7%.
That's
the highest we've seen for a major country.
by far, yeah. Factors mentioned are growing awareness, government programs improving access, and importantly, local manufacturing making devices more affordable.
Huge potential there. Who else in APAC?
Let's see. Australia, about 27 million, 8.1% growth. Singapore, smaller market, 10 million, but very high growth at 9.1%. Taiwan, 20 million, 8.6% growth. Southeast Asia as a region, about 34 million, growing at a very fast 9.6%. And the rest of APAC adds another 23 million or so, also growing strongly at 8.6%.
Incredible growth across that whole region, but India, Singapore, and Southeast Asia really jumping out. Okay, quick stops in the other regions. South America.
South America, about 82 million total, 6.8% CAGR. Brazil leads, around 35 million, growing at 7.4%. Medical tourism and infrastructure investment mentioned there.
Great.
Argentina is next, almost 14 million, with strong growth at 7.7%. Awareness and government initiatives seem key. Then Colombia, Peru, Chile all growing between 6.6% and 7.1%. The rest of South America adds another 13 million, growing slightly slower at 5.9%.
So solid growth led by Brazil and Argentina. Middle East, you mentioned high growth there too.
Yeah.
7.4% CAGR overall on an $86 million market. Saudi Arabia is the largest, over 30 million, growing at 7.7%. The UAE is next, almost 18 million, even faster growth at 7.9%. Strong number.
Qatar, smaller market, about 7 million, 6.9% growth, driven by healthcare investments. And Turkey also stands out, same size market as Qatar, around 7 million, but growing at 8.0% CAGR. Expansion of their medical device sector, hospital investments are pushing that.
Right, Turkey showing up strong again. Egypt,
about 5 million, 7.2% growth. And the rest of the Middle East combined is about 19 million, growing at 6.6%.
So definitely a region benefiting from focused healthcare spending. And finally, Africa.
Africa, the smallest region, about 47.5 million in 2025, growing at 6.4%. South Africa is the main market, nearly 17 million, growing at a solid 7.3%. Driven by chronic diseases, private healthcare growth. Nigeria is much smaller, under 4 million, but growing at 6.6%. Infrastructure development and awareness efforts are helping there. The rest of Africa makes up the bulk, about 27 million, growing a bit slower at 5.6%.
So still developing, but showing definite potential, especially in South Africa and Nigeria. Okay, that's a fantastic detailed tour. Now, stepping back, what are the core things driving this whole market expansion globally?
Well, the report boils it down to a few key drivers. First, just the rising prevalence of urological disorders. Things like incontinence, BPH, bladder cancer, they're more common, especially as populations age.
Right, more need.
Second, more surgeries are being performed worldwide. And many surgeries require postoperative catheterization. So more procedures mean more catheter use.
Makes sense.
And third, just the rising incidence of urinary incontinence itself across different age groups, not just the elderly. That creates a baseline need.
Okay, those seem like strong fundamental drivers.
Yeah.
Any headwinds, things holding the market back?
Yeah, a couple of restraints were mentioned. One is simply the availability of alternative methods for bladder management or catheterization. Sometimes other approaches are preferred.
Okay, competition from alternatives.
And the other is an inherent issue with Foley catheters themselves, the risk of blockages and crustaceans developing over time. That can cause complications, require replacements, and it's a known downside.
Right, the product isn't perfect. So what about trends? What's changing or developing in the Foley world?
Two main trends highlighted. First is ongoing technological advancement. Better materials, like we discussed, focusing on biocompatibility, flexibility, big focus on antimicrobial coatings to fight infections, and even design tweaks for easier insertion or better patient comfort.
Constant improvement.
Exactly. The second trend mentioned is the integration of telemedicine. The idea that remote monitoring or management, maybe patient education via telehealth, could start playing a role in how catheters are managed, especially for long-term or home care patients.
Interesting to think how that might work. Okay, finally, the competitive scene. Who's making and selling all these catheters? You said it's fragmented?
Yeah, quite fragmented. A mix of big global companies and smaller regional or domestic players.
Any big names mentioned?
Yeah, the report names folks like Becton, Dickinson, BD Cardinal Health, Coloplast, B. Braun, Teleflex. Those are some of the major international players.
And what are they focusing on?
A lot of strategic stuff. Mergers, acquisitions, partnerships, trying to expand their reach globally, grab more market share. Big focus on R&D, too, developing those new materials, advanced silicones, antimicrobial versions, trying to get an edge on patient safety and comfort.
Right.
And then you have emerging companies, especially in those fast-growing regions like APAC and Latin America, using new tech or local partnerships to gain ground.
Any specific examples of new products?
Yeah, a couple were mentioned recently. UNOT-AccuIP launched some open-tip silicone Foleys back in January 2025, designed for easier drainage and insertion.
Okay.
And Coloplast, in May 2024, they expanded their Luja line, that's their intermittent catheter, with a version specifically for women, building on their previous tech. So yeah, innovation is definitely happening.
Great examples. Okay, let's try and wrap this up. What are the absolute key takeaways from this deep dive into the Foley catheter market?
All right, key takeaways. 1, it's a big market, over $2 billion now, and it's set for really solid growth, heading towards $3.5 billion by 2033.
Right, significant growth.
2, regionally, North America leads in size, but Asia-Pacific is where the explosive growth is happening. Definitely the region to watch.
Got it. APAC growth.
3, product-wise, three-way catheters dominate now for specific uses, but the versatile two-way catheters are the fastest-growing segment overall.
Two-way growth, okay.
4, materials. Latex still holds the biggest share, mainly due to cost, but silicone is rapidly gaining ground because of its benefits for patient safety and long-term use.
Oh, the shift to silicone.
And 5, end users. Long-term care facilities are the biggest market segment currently due to demographics, but hospitals are the sector showing the most rapid growth because of increasing procedures.
Largest versus fastest growing.
Okay, that pretty much covers the main dynamics, I think.
Yeah, that's a really clear picture. It's a market shaped by aging populations, more medical procedures.
Absolutely. Which leads to maybe a final thought for our listeners.
Left where?
Well, thinking about that focus on patient comfort and especially on preventing infections, how might the next wave of materials science, maybe completely new polymers or coatings, further revolutionize this market? What could that look like?
Good question. Beyond silicone.
Maybe. Or thinking about that telemedicine trend, what really innovative ways could emerge to manage catheters remotely? Could we see smart catheters, better ways to educate patients at home using tech? Lots of possibilities building on these trends.
Definitely food for thought.
Yeah.
How technology and materials might continue to reshape even a seemingly standard medical device. Great stuff.